Organizations that relied on USAID funding were left with major questions after that agency was closed. How would they support high-risk groups? And would the lack of funding lead to more HIV and tuberculosis infections? Well, thanks to support from the Pulitzer Center, Larry Miller was able to travel to Gaborone, Botswana, to examine how the nonprofit Stepping Stones International is supporting high-risk groups without USAID support. It is the final installment in his series, Aid Interrupted.
At about 6 o'clock this morning, I hopped on a flight from Johannesburg, South Africa to make my way to the capital city in Botswana. After about a 30-minute drive, I arrived at Stepping Stones International. This is an NGO here in Botswana that works with young boys, young girls, teaching them life skills, providing training, and really a safe space to ensure that they are productive, that they are healthy, and also helping them work through traumatic situations.
So here is our counseling rooms.
Beauty Magosha is the program director.
We use a holistic program where we engage the young people themselves, the children and youth, their families and the communities that we work with, ensuring that we empower them with life skills, with psychosocial support, and support them with their education.
The campus of Stepping Stones International was buzzing during our visit. Students huddled in groups, others helping with food delivery on campus, and staff preparing meals. It was alive.
So they come with a lot of traumatic challenges that impede them to be empowered and to grow. So with the provision of the first entrance in our program in psychosocial support so that we can engage. And we find that most of our children have suicidal ideations, have have a lot of anger, are dealing with grief that have never been addressed before. So they find themselves not knowing exactly what to do.
For years, Stepping Stones International has helped vulnerable children, young women, and young men with personal enrichment, HIV testing, prevention services, and trauma support. Then, 2 years into a $7 million USAID-backed contract, that funding was cut off without notice. Secretary of State Marco Rubio posting on X in March of 2025 that 83% of USAID contracts were canceled because they spent tens of billions of dollars in ways that did not serve and in some cases even harmed the core national interests of the United States. Stepping Stones was implementing PEPFAR, the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, which launched under President George W. Bush.
We were implementing PEPFAR USAID project in 8 sites in the district where we were providing orphan and OVC program for the orphan and vulnerable children. We implementing DREAMS program for the adolescent and young women. We were also doing community HIV testing and support for people living with HIV and also providing HIV preventive services to the people that are HIV negative.
To lose that money, that's a huge blow.
It is. It is a huge blow to the beneficiaries because also we didn't have time to prepare our beneficiaries of our exist. So we just left them like that.
The World Health Organization lists Botswana as a high-burden country for its prevalence of HIV. 15.7% of adults here are HIV positive, but considerable progress has been made, decreasing the mother-to-child HIV transmission to about 1% and surpassing key United Nations HIV benchmarks for testing, treatment, and viral suppression in 2022. The fear now is that without funds, progress could be reversed. Kennedy Mumpele is the executive director for the Center for Youth Hope, which cares for young people living with HIV and AIDS.
We just need to see how we can do this because, it's difficult to gain these strides like Botswana did. It will be very painful if we slide back.
Botswana has signed a new 3-year health agreement with the U.S. State Department worth nearly $500 million. The U.S. will contribute $106 million. Botswana will put up the rest. The State Department says that the goal is to sustain progress beyond Botswana's HIV targets. But the agreement does not replace all the USAID money groups like Stepping Stones lost when their contracts were canceled in early 2025.
Kind of an amazing story.
Dr. Jennifer Cates is Senior Vice President and Director of the Global and Public Policy Program at KFF.
The U.S. has been quite generous giving funding to countries. What's being asked of countries? And there should there be some kind of co-investment requirement, which frankly is done by many other global health institutions. What's happened over time is what started as an emergency program in 2003 and was meant to stave off a major crisis on the continent of Africa, became part of like the way many countries were responding to their healthcare system. And at some point, maybe in the last 5 years or longer, there have been increasing discussions about, well, what's the end game here? How long will the U.S. be doing this? And I think good questions. Should the U.S. do this in perpetuity?
Newly released State Department data shows what experts say are some warning signs since the USAID funding cancellations, with noted declines in global HIV testing, diagnosis, and prevention services.
If I had to hypothesize, it's hard to see how everything that happened last year and these ongoing changes are not going to negatively impact HIV outcomes. Will it be a catastrophe? I'm not going to say that. There were some predictions that it would be, but it's hard to see how it won't have a negative impact.
A spokesperson for the State Department told us that there are no plans to sunset PEPFAR, and they remain committed to responsible stewardship of the program. But in this new reality, many NGOs are left to figure out how to fill the gaps and avoid the dangers that may lie ahead without support from USAID.
I will not throw away the great work that was done in the past. I think even for us as an organization, the good systems, the quality implementation most of that support, we got it from USAID to be where we are.
And Larry joins us now. First, let me just say this has been some really great reporting. We've had the chance to watch all 3 parts of your series concluding today. We know the work that you put into this leading up to it and the work that you've done, which we see here in this really comprehensive reporting. You started with a question about what happened after this USAID funding was canceled. There are lots of parts to this story, right?
Yeah.
What's been your takeaway from it all?
You know, I think initially, it was easy to assume that everything was sort of as dire as some of the reports led us to believe. I think being on the ground, you get a sense that it is significant, the impact that the closure of USAID has had on these NGOs. What we are seeing, however, is the resilience of these NGOs to continue to serve people despite the funding cuts. There is and are warning signs, though, that this could potentially lead to increases in TB cases and HIV infections. And we're already starting to see that, as we heard from some of the students that spoke out and from even some of the organizations that service those that are HIV positive or have AIDS, that say they have lost clients, people that they can no longer find, that are no longer taking treatment. So we do know that the warning signs are there, and we don't know whether or not that's going to compel the Trump administration to change course. They're committed to this America First global health strategy that they say is really sort of this new order in terms of how they're approaching humanitarian aid from the U.S. And they're also clear, too, that there has to be greater input from these countries in their own healthcare infrastructure because, in their opinion, the U.S. cannot continue to sort of foot the bill continuously, that there does have to be an off-ramp. The critique, though, has been, well, if there does have to be an off-ramp, then we have to do it in an orderly process and not abruptly in the way in which it was done last year.
Well, I think what we appreciate is the contours around what you were able to find out there, Larry. And I encourage everyone, if you're just joining us for this series, to get caught up. There are 3 pieces in the series, deeply impactful and enlightening. Again, the series is Aid Interrupted, and you can see it right now on WUSA 9. We've got extended conversations and experts talking about the future of global health, so you can watch that this weekend here on the WUSA 9 app. Larry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The news at 6 is next.